know what, we started out in Des Moines this morning, we made it over to Council Bluffs, we were coming back this way anyway, so we just stopped by, and if there were 3 people here, we'd all kind of sit here and talk, but there's enough of you that I'll pester you with my speech, so we'll just do that. And so I guess the other thing that I need to do is I need to thank Tina. Probably thank her more than anyone else. And she's right back there. Wave, Tina. Everyone saw you on the way in, though, I think. You know, I really can't imagine a better partner in life. You know, meeting Tina changed my life, and all for the better. And one of the things that she's taught me is Tina's from a career military family. She spent her childhood moving from base to base all around the United States, and actually spent a number of years in her youth overseas on military bases. And so I've always supported our military, but Tina's helped me to more fully understand and appreciate the service and sacrifice of their families as well. And together, Tina and I are raising 2 awesome kids, Eden and Max. Eden, you want to practice your wave, the little princess wave we practice? All right, Max. Hey, Max. Hi. There he is. Oh, good, he's eating a styrofoam cup. That should be good. Have to see how that comes out later, so to speak. You know, you guys have seen Eden and Max, and a lot of you have seen them grow up, and you might know that I used to always tease them by saying that, you know, they look just like me. But then they cried, and so I had to kind of stop doing that. So, but the reason they're here today, they're playing hooky from first grade and from preschool to be here, but the reason they're here is, you know, we sat down and thought about this long and hard and made this decision as a family. And so I really wanted them to be here and be a part of the day as we traveled around. They've been in the car a lot today, driving all over, and I really appreciate them being here. And in fact, you might say if it weren't for Max and Eden, I wouldn't be standing here. Because as many of you know, when you have children, your perspective changes. It's not just the here and now, what am I doing, what's in it for me. All of a sudden you start thinking about what you're going to leave behind for the next generation. And, you know, I want to raise my kids to be hardworking. I want to raise them to be proud Americans. But I'd also like them to enter adulthood with the same opportunities that I had when I did, and maybe even better opportunities. And I think right now, given the path that our federal government is on, it's not an overstatement to say that the very future of our children is at stake. And so we really have to ask ourselves, do we want them to have the same opportunities that we did? Or are we comfortable just sitting back, not doing anything, and watching them be buried under a literal mountain of debt and big government programs? So that is why I'm standing here today. You know, I believe I have the connection to Iowa. I believe I have the knowledge of what needs to be done and the skills to effectively help lead on those issues. And that's why today I am announcing my candidacy for Congress from Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. Now, this was not a decision that Tina and I made lightly, but we decided that conservatives must hold this seat if we're going to have any hope of changing the leftward plunge of our federal government. We must nominate a candidate who can unite the party, who can also attract independents who are interested, and maybe even some disaffected and disenchanted Democrats right now. And that's the way that my hero Ronald Reagan did it. That's the way that Chuck Grassley does it yet today. We cannot afford to have a candidate, however, that will self-implode during the general election. We've seen that happen in other states too often recently. As I like to say, after all, we have just one bite at the apple to keep this 3rd district in common sense conservative hands. Good job, Eden. She's really wanting a cookie after this, isn't she? But you know, it's not enough to just get elected. Obviously that helps, but it's not enough. You know, neither an ineffectual conservative nor a go along to get along Republican is going to provide the type of strong leadership that we need in Washington, D.C. So, I mean, I think enthusiasm and bumper stickers, slogans, have their place. But what we really need in Washington, D.C. is someone who can get something done. Now, the other Republicans in this race probably generally agree on an agenda of lower taxes and controlled spending. But we need more than that. We need more than someone who will just vote right. They also need to be an effective advocate for us. Now, an effective congressman, in my mind, is someone who listens here at home, but who then can be heard in Washington, D.C. Its congressman must be able to persuade people and bring them to the cause, but do so without abandoning their core principles. And I think the skill set I've developed over my lifetime of advocacy for Iowa can serve the 3rd District well. So what are some of those skills? Effective communication, clarity of purpose, earning respect by always telling the truth, seeing things from other people's perspective, if for no other reason than to better understand your own, and painting the big picture and then focusing on that end goal so that everyone can see how it helps helps everyone. But maybe most importantly, it's knowing when to negotiate over the fine points and when to fight to the last for principles. These are the skills that we need in Washington, because we all know the problems. The federal government today is doing too many things, and it's doing most of them poorly. I think the American people think that our federal government today is, quite frankly, dysfunctional. And I think they think that because, well, it is. I mean, that's the problem we have. Despite record levels of taxation, we borrow roughly 40 cents out of every dollar that we spend. And this administration, this was something when I looked it up, I almost didn't believe it. I had to fact check it 5 times. This administration is on pace to pile up more debt in 8 years than the entire 224 years before them. That is not only unwise, passing this on to Eden and Max and other people's kids, that is not only unwise and unfair, I think it's immoral. And yet this unrestrained and unfunded spending continues, even on projects we know don't work. Just a couple years ago, we once again tried the boondoggle of a temporary stimulus bill. But as an Iowa farm kid knows, it doesn't do any good to prime the pump if the well is dry. And I think that Washington, D.C. has sucked the taxpayer well dry. So how do we bring fiscal reality and responsibility back to Washington, D.C.? I've got 4 short phrases for it. Stop it, simplify it, solve it, and secure it. So let's start with stop it. When I grew up, my Grandpa Shaw, he taught me, when you find yourself in a hole, what should you do? What's the first thing you should do? Stop digging. Yeah, I've tried to teach that to Eden. Good job. Okay, I think Washington, D.C. needs to stop digging. It needs to stop ignoring the Constitution. It needs to stop enacting job-killing regulations on businesses and farmers. It needs to stop raising taxes and fees. And it needs to stop spending more money than it takes in. Just stop it. Now, some people would say the secret to that is just pass a balanced budget amendment. And, I'm for that. I'd co-sponsor that in Congress. I'd vote for it. But if that's your only plan to address spending, then I think it's a recipe for simply kicking the can down the road. Because after all, think about it. It takes a 2/3 supermajority to pass a balanced budget amendment. Long before we had that 2/3 supermajority for the constitutional amendment, we would have a conservative majority that would be able to restrain spending and restore fiscal sanity. Now, simplify it. One means of controlling spending is cutting the government bureaucracy and streamlining government oversight and regulations. There's way too much paperwork. Our small businesses spend way too much time filling out forms for Uncle Sam instead of growing their business and hiring and creating new jobs. And we've got to simplify the tax code. I think there's a very easy way goal that we should have for that. If you're a typical Iowa family that owns a home, nothing too complicated, you ought to be able to fill out your taxes on the back of a postcard. It shouldn't be any more complicated than that. Now, ultimately, I'd like to see either like a flat tax or a fair tax, but we can't wait for there to be a consensus on that perfect type of solution when there are good changes that can and should be made immediately. And I've got a plan. I think maybe the first step to tax simplification is this. We need to enact a law that requires members of Congress to do their own taxes. What do you think? I think that would get the ball rolling pretty quick on tax simplification. Now, solve it. The only true way to get our fiscal house in order is to grow the economy. Ronald Reagan knew that. Jack Kemp knew that. Quite frankly, a generation ago, Jack Kennedy knew that. Punitive levels of taxation stifle innovation, stifle growth, and they punish success. And so it's time to stop talking about wealth redistribution and to start talking about wealth creation. I've always believed that America is the land of opportunity, not because Congress can pass a law to take from you and give to you, but because it didn't matter whether your mother and father, if they were a janitor, if they were a small business owner, if they were a stay-at-home parent, if they were a Fortune 500 CEO, it didn't matter. If you were willing to work hard and take some risks, you could be successful. That's what made this the land of opportunity. And so that type of economic growth is going to require investment. And investment demands stability. So we just have to repeal job-killing regulations like Obamacare. It creates uncertainty, it increases taxes, and it discourages businesses from creating jobs. It does the exact opposite of what we need to do to get our house in order. And if you don't believe me, just this morning, the Congressional Budget Office released their 10-year projected impact of Obamacare, and they said because it's going to weigh down and slow the economy so much that it's going to cost 2.3 million jobs will be lost because of Obamacare. And most of those are low-income jobs. Obama's out there talking about the minimum wage and wants to help low-income people. Maybe he should let them keep a job they have. It will also add $1 trillion to the debt over 10 years because it slows the economy. That's the opposite of how to get out of this budget nightmare and address the budget deficit and then ultimately start paying down on the debt so that we don't shackle Ian and Max and their generation with a ball and chain. So it's the exact opposite of what we need to do to grow the economy. Now finally, secure it. I think the most basic role of the federal government is security. We must maintain a strong national defense to preserve our liberties. But I also think we need to be more judicious when we ask our young men and women to put their lives in harm's way. We do not need to be the world's policemen. We must remain ever vigilant in the war on terrorists. Tina and I were in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. And from my office window, I could look out and I saw the smoke coming out of the Pentagon before it was even on the TV news, on Fox News. And I have to tell you, that's an image that's going to stay with Tina and I our whole lives. And so that is something I care deeply about. But I want to tell you something else. We must also hold dear our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms. I will never sacrifice my Fourth Amendment rights in the name of security. That is the absolute wrong way to go in a free society. So instead of having the NSA monitor my emails, track my daughter's phone calls, or even observe my wife's obsession with Candy Crush, none of which, they do that, by the way, they track which apps you're doing on the phone. None of that, by the way, stops terrorists, not once. What we should use those resources for is securing our borders. If a person can enter this country illegally, whether with a shirt, just a shirt on their back, or a backpack full of drugs, they could also enter this country carrying a dirty bomb or a chemical weapon. It is time that we get serious about securing our borders before we wish we had. Economic security is also important, and mostly important for our seniors, and that should be a priority. Folks that are at or near retirement age have played by the rules, and they paid into the Social Security Trust Fund their entire lives, and they deserve a return on that investment. And so I think we've got to make that a priority. If we do nothing, Social Security will go broke. Everybody knows that. The math is there. So we have to do some things. Now, when I worked with Senator Grassley on the Senate Special Committee on Aging, we did a lot to focus on cutting out the waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security and other programs. But I think more can and should be done along those lines as well. So to kind of sum that up, by telling the federal government to stop it, simplify it, solve it, and secure it, we can spur economic growth, which will ultimately solve our fiscal problem. Because growth equates to jobs, jobs equate to jobs equate to higher tax revenues. And it is that will get us on the path to a balanced budget and deficit reduction. So fostering an environment of robust job creation will be my #1 priority if elected to Congress. Now in Iowa, bring it home a little bit, in Iowa, a strong economy for everyone starts on the farm. I grew up in the 80s. I remember very well how all Iowans suffered during the 1980s because of the farm crisis. And today, Iowans, I believe, on and off the farm, are doing better because the Iowa farm economy is prospering. And agriculture has been powering our economy. So I'm proud that the renewable fuels incentives that I've worked on these last several years have helped advance that and have led to record farm output, record farm income, and record land prices. It's kind of like when you skip a stone across the pond, those ripples have moved across the economic spectrum of Iowa. And robust farm income isn't just felt at the farm dealership on the edge of town. It's at the clothing store on Main Street. It's at the car dealership. It's at the home improvement center. It's even at the local community colleges we have around here, or higher education institutions in the 3rd District like Simpson College, where I went, or Drake University. So I think the ripple effects of renewable fuels in agriculture have helped lead to one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation. Think about this. I don't think it's any coincidence at all that 4 of the 6 lowest state unemployment rates are in Iowa, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. I think it's absolutely tied back to the ag economy. But I also want to stress that our goal isn't just an strong Iowa economy, it's a strong national economy. We all benefit from that. So when I talk about boosting the ag economy, please understand that's the beginning, that is not the end. Over the course of this campaign, I'm going to be addressing a literal alphabet of issues and positions, and I try to get Eden to help me with this. So we're going to start with A for adoption, B for small business, C for constitutional restraint, D for deficit reduction, E for energy independence, F for foreign policy, G for growth, H for healthcare, I for immigration, and then we ran out of time on the way here, so we'll keep working on that. But But to do any of these things, I first need your help. So today I want to ask for your help. I want to ask for your help. Because if you join me, I commit to taking the skills I've learned over 20 plus years of advocating for Iowa and putting them to work for you in Congress. And to make that happen, I need your vote 4 months from today, June 3rd. 4 months from today, that Tuesday, I need your vote. And in between now and then, I need you to recruit your friends, your family, your co-workers to join us, strangers on the street, people you run into at the grocery store, I don't care. And get them to say, hey, here's a guy that knows what we need to get done, but also, and this is the key and I think what differentiates us, also has that skill set to actually be that effective leader that we need. And so if you like that, please join us. Thank you for coming out on an interesting Iowa winter night, and God bless you and God bless Iowa.